Hi folks, welcome to another edition of Government Matters. Today's program is going to be a little bit different. As you know, we frequently have people who are part of government, either on the state level or on the municipal level, come in and talk to us about what's going on. But today we're emphasizing a particular business, and an important business to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that's cannabis. And our guest is Payton Shubrick. Payton is the owner of Bricks Dispensary here in Springfield. It's on Main Street in the Republican Building. I've done pieces for the newspaper about Payton. I've done pieces about cannabis. We wanted to have her come in just sort of to give us sort of a temperature of what's happening in the cannabis industry in Massachusetts. And Payton, thanks much for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so first of all, I just want people to understand some context about how you got involved with this and a little bit about how long it took you to open up the store in terms of your business journey.
Yeah, most certainly. Thank you for that question. So I graduated College of the Holy Cross in 2015 and was really eager, having listened to Jesuits for 4 years, to figure out my purpose in life. How would I move mountains? What would that look like? And in 2016, the voters voted to legalize cannabis. And prior to that, I thought going to law school would be the way I make my mark on the world. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that had this entrepreneurial spirit, really wanting to drive economic development in the city of Springfield, understanding that would be the place I forever call home. And so I started to explore what it would look like to participate in the legal market. I went to a Springfield public high school. I knew people consume cannabis here in the city of Springfield, but I also started to see many multi-state operators that were entering the state that had no community ties. They weren't talking about how cannabis could be a part of an individual's wellness routine, but instead talking about Springfield as though it was a profit center. And that was really concerning at the time because I understood the money that could be made. I mean, we're talking about $1 billion industry, and yet when you look at certain communities, the only jobs being offered are that of hourly jobs, not salaried positions that help to drive economic development. And so after complaining for quite a bit, with the support of my family, as Bricks is a play on the last name Shubrick, with 6 people being in my immediate family, I thought I would try and figure this thing out and really understand what it would be to have a license in the space. That journey started in 2016 as I started going to the Springfield City Council meetings, understanding zoning and what it would actually require. But it wasn't until 2019 through a request for proposals that we could actually apply. So I was just soaking it all in for 3 years, going to different events that were talking about cannabis, different community outreach meetings for licensees that were hopeful to be hosted in these communities. And I was lucky enough to be one of 4 selected in 2019, which was really exciting. But the problem was, in my business plan, I didn't account for a pandemic. And so in March of 2020, things changed in terms of how do you find an investor. To be clear, when you're talking about a retail licensure, which is what we have at Bricks, you're looking at $1.5 million. And so—
Is that just in startup fees?
Oh, most certainly. Just startup fees as you think about build out, licensure fees, but then also thinking about how you're going to procure your first set of product, how are you going to make sure everyone is badged, and so many other aspects that go into the business that you don't think of, especially because you have to have control of the property the entire time. So that often means that you're leasing even though you're not able to sell product. And the licensure process is not quick. I mean, on average, I've heard of it being 15 months. I don't know anyone who's accomplished it quite that fast.
Wow.
From the time of receiving a host community agreement, which is exclusively at the local level, working with a city or town to be hosted, which oftentimes requires multiple conversations, city council approval at times, then going to the state level and actually applying for licensure, and then waiting. The running joke was hurry up and wait, as we oftentimes would check month after month to see, Are we on the agenda? Are we making meaningful progress going from provisional licensure to final licensure to eventually operate? So for us, the journey was long. We didn't actually open doors until September of 2022. And at that point in time, there were only 2 dispensaries open here in the city of Springfield. But if you looked at other communities, there were 8 and sometimes even 10 as you think about the more saturated communities such as Holyoke, Worcester, and many others.
When this legislation came out, there was a lot of talk about this being something for entrepreneurs. And, you know, it was sort of used in the same kind of language as, well, remember there was a frozen yogurt operation on every corner. In Springfield there was for a long time. And I get it. It's just like when we had VHS rental. You know, there was a little video store in every neighborhood. And it was sort of framed like this could be something that a person or a couple or a family could get involved in, that it was that kind of let's open the doors up. It isn't that at all.
No.
Because, as you just said, it takes a lot of capital up front before you open the doors and sell any product of any sort to get going. Do you think that that anything that you have seen in terms of some of the suggested revisions to the legislation, is it going to make it easier for people to actually participate in this business, or is it turning into something that still requires an awful lot of money to get going?
Oh yeah, it depends on what people you're talking about. I mean, Massachusetts is the first state to see a decline in both the categories of women and people of color in comparison to the national averages that are out there. And so unfortunately, what we're seeing is it's not just the barrier of entry, which requires a lot of capital. It's also the nuances of understanding how to operate the business and stay viable. I mean, when you think about the tax burdens that are present and so many other factors, this is not a space that has set up people of color, women, veterans, and so many other underrepresented groups for success. I mean, if I think about my time from 2016 to present day, I know more people of color and women that were hopeful. These are people who came into the space well-intentioned, wanting to help consumers understand how cannabis can be a part of their wellness journey, but ran out of money. And these were people who were committed. I mean, you have to have commitment if you're going to drain your 401k to be a part of this industry. And yet they don't have business models today. Many of them are general managers at a multi-state operation. And that's unfortunate, but it's the reality. We don't have enough people of these underrepresented groups that are in the space, and we don't have many of them actually thriving. You do have groups that are doing the best they can to hold on, but there are so many obstacles working against them. Even myself as a small business owner, it doesn't make it sustainable for us to continue to stay in the space, and that's the difficulty in it. Opening doors is not the finish line, right? That's the start of the race.
Right. And I'll just say to the audience, I buy from Six Bricks, okay? I use gummies to sleep every night.
And we appreciate your business.
Thank you. But, you know, the way I see you advertising and marketing is if I go in, when you're checking the ID, there's little posters up that's saying you've got specials going on, or I get a text from you guys on my phone, and the text says, go to this link to see our specials, et cetera, et cetera. The way the legislature set up how dispensaries can market is not the way, if we want to compare it to the way the state is set up for alcohol stores to market. How bad a constriction are these advertising and marketing regulations on the industry?
Oh, it hurts the industry holistically as you think about helping consumers to really understand the ways in which cannabis can be used. I mean, we have data that supports the reality. The top 4 uses in the adult use market is sleep, stress, anxiety, as well as focus. And yet at the same time, many of the marketing restrictions don't allow you to actually speak to that reality. And the the places you can actually advertise are so limited. It definitely supports MSOs that have deeper pockets in being able to advertise. If we think about something as simple as a billboard, right? You're looking at a minimum of $3,000 a month. Well, if you're a small mom and pop shop operation, that $3,000, that's a chunk of your payroll. That's not something that you're going to be comfortable spending. And that's just for one, so think about the many. I mean, it's funny to me that I can sit at home and on my TV see multiple advertisements for liquor, right? And we're not talking about just beer and wine. We're talking about your vodkas, your whiskeys, and yet at the same time, those are not options available. The way the rules are written for us, we have to guarantee a certain percentage of the audience base is over the age of 21. Well, if you don't have the data set, you can't even think about advertising there. So it definitely hurts us as we think about an industry, and I think it plays into the stigma, right, that cannabis is a gateway drug, and the many things that we heard that were promulgated during the war on drugs that simply aren't true, and we know that now, but how do we combat a lot of that? And there's just not many avenues to do so.
I will say that driving up 91, driving north and south on 91, it's amazing the number of billboards that are for cannabis places. And of course, a billboard is great, but on the other hand, it gives you a very limited means of messaging.
Correct.
And I've noticed a lot of these are, exit 5, cannabis. It doesn't speak to the quality of the product, the variety of the product, the cost of the product. Mm-hmm. If I go over there to this dispensary, it may be cheaper, et cetera, or they may have a superior product. None of that information that you get about other consumer products can you get from cannabis because of the restrictions on the advertising. So it's very limited messaging that you guys have got.
Oh, most certainly. And to take it a step further, if you think about the dynamic present in the state of Massachusetts with so many multi-state operators, I mean, Massachusetts was the first to have over 10 enter the state. And so when you think about the dynamic, I like to say I'm not anti-MSO, I'm just pro-small business. And the difference is that we can't rely on being transactional. We need to engage our customers as you think about the specials and the text messages that you receive so that folks understand as they're navigating their cannabis journey, what are the products that are going to be best for them? And that's hard to summarize on a billboard. And it's even harder when you can't engage in traditional marketing activities that help support the learning that I still think is behind where it should be for us as an industry at this point in time.
One thing that your operation stresses is the health and medical advantages to adding cannabis to your life. And I'm not saying that the other dispensaries don't talk about this, but you've made this sort of a cornerstone of what you're doing at Six Bricks. So as you were formulating your idea for dispensary, was this something that came to you as a way of really sort of defining your role in the community?
Almost certainly. Our tagline is people, plant, and purpose. And that was intentional because I wanted people to be at the forefront of all that we were creating so that it was truly more of a cannabis experience than a cannabis transaction. With so many retailers open in the state, you can go anywhere and purchase product. But what makes the difference is the customer education that we're providing. I want our customers to understand terpenes and cannabinoids, but even more, I want them to understand the brands that you're supporting. If you think about a group like Freshly Baked, they are both veteran-owned, Black-owned. That's a beautiful thing for a consumer to know because if that matters to them, I want them to be able to spend their money where it matters. As opposed to the folks that are coming in and they're simply looking for pre-rolls or a vape, and Rove, which is a multi-state operator, might fit the bill for them. And there's nothing wrong with that either way, but how do we advance ourselves as an industry? And education is the biggest way to get there. There are so many things that we have yet to scratch the surface on as we think about progressing forward as an industry. So yes, we stress education to ensure that folks have the information they need to achieve the effects they're looking for. And we even take it a step further by having Wellness Wednesdays and working with a group called Tetragram in order for folks to journal their cannabis experience, because that's the other hard part. Sometimes you have a great experience and you just don't remember what it was. So we're trying many different things to help support a better customer experience, but that's also because I'm from a community that I care about, and so that's the difference for us.
Some of our viewers will be following this, some of them will probably not be following this, but the news about the Cannabis Control Commission has not been very good lately. As the chair of the commission, Shannon O'Brien, who was from Western Massachusetts, has been taken out of her position by Treasurer Deborah Goldberg. I've read some stories where other commissioners are, I think a good word would be nervous about just how the commission is progressing in addressing issues that need to be addressed. But it seems like the word chaos may not be too strong to describe what's happening. Is any of this are any of these issues of uncertainty in Boston affecting dispensary owners like yourself?
Almost certainly. I think it conveys to the general public that stigma that we talked about earlier, right? As you're in the infancy of any industry, having clear leadership that is both strong in their intent and consistent in their regulations is important. And unfortunately, we're simply not seeing that right now. And what frustrates me most as a small business owner is it takes away from the reality of what we need in order to progress forward as an industry. I think about a license type such as delivery. They just were able to get a universal decision from the Cannabis Control Commission that the second driver should be removed. And yet we know it still has to go through the legislator, but that was something they fought for a year and 8 months. And so when you think about that dynamic of having your needs not being met for that long, you still have to operate the entire time. You're still renting space the entire time. And that's the issue as we think about why we're not seeing stronger diversity numbers, because those who need help and support are oftentimes those that are waiting the longest as you think about it holistically. One of the challenges I'm having as a retailer right now is I can't sell medical cannabis because it requires a vertical integration. What is that? That means I have to grow, manufacture, and produce as well as sell. Well, I'm not really interested in growing cannabis. I also happen to know there's an overabundance in the state. I simply want to be able to better service the city of Springfield.
Sure.
And yet that change may not happen anytime soon. And so, yes, to leverage the words of chaotic would be fair, but it's also unfortunate because it's doing both us as small businesses a disservice as well as the consumers at the end of the day.
So let's just back up a moment. There's been two big subjects that people have talked about, especially since dispensaries been open. The first is the concept of a delivery service. So tell me if I'm wrong, please. So the idea is that you could order something online from a dispensary, a delivery service could bring it to your house, they would go through all sorts of a procedure to check that the person, and you would prepay it online, but you would check to make sure the person you're delivering to is A, legal age, and B, actually the person, et cetera, et cetera. And what I heard, because I covered a Holyoke City Council meeting where they're talking about this probably last year, is that there had to be 2 people in the vehicle. There are no weapons in the vehicle. It's not like an armored car. There was a limit to how much product you could have in the vehicle. I think it was like a $10,000 cap of worth. I guess the idea being that if there was a robbery of the delivery, there would be no cash involved, and there would also be a limited amount of product involved. But these delivery services haven't really started. And this was touted by the Cannabis Control Commission of, well, if you're a black person or a Hispanic person and you wanted to get involved in the cannabis industry, but you don't have the money for a dispensary, this is a way to be involved in the cannabis industry. But none of this really has come about, has it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things to know because you did a wonderful job of highlighting so much of what is problematic. So when the Cannabis Control decided to move forward with the delivery licensure, it had a 3-year exclusivity window around social equity or economic empowerment applicants. When we think about both of those statuses, it primarily speaks to those who are born and raised in areas of disproportionate impact, which Springfield is one, those who have prior convictions in cannabis, and a few other different categories, primarily trying to get more Black and brown people in the space. The problem is when you started to think about how that license type would become profitable, yes, many of the challenges you outlined are present. There's 2 types of models, right? Which is to say, one is you in fact are picking up a product from a dispensary. The other is that consumers could order directly with that delivery service. The easiest way to think about it is like a wine subscription service, right? You go on the website, you make the order, and you get it delivered versus ordering from 6 Bricks and having a delivery service bring it to your home. The problem with both is, as you outlined, having 2 drivers in the vehicle, regardless of the order, both of those folks have to get paid, which becomes extremely problematic. When you think about the limits and how much you carry, does it make it cost prohibitive? Because now think about gas and so many other factors of just getting the vehicle where it needs to be. And so it's unfortunate because yes, it was touted as something to get more people of color in the space. And yet when you think about the economics of it, it doesn't actually work. So you had more people spending time, energy, and money on a license type that was set up for failure from the beginning. And the other piece is if you look at certain communities, there's not a strong culture of getting delivery, especially within cannabis. I mean, I think about Western Massachusetts, most people are going to get in their car and go. Right. But if you think of Boston, yeah, that's a much more popular model there. So there have been so many challenges around it. And again, it speaks to those numbers declining. We're simply not seeing people of color being set up for success to actually own and operate in the space versus simply participate.
We've got bars. And people go to bars and they have an alcoholic beverage. And the analogy has been, well, why can't they go to a place and smoke a joint or have a gummy or whatever? And I do know for a fact that one of the Cannabis Control Commissioners was in Springfield, was earlier this year, was asking questions about this. But again, that doesn't seem to be moving forward, which would be another piece of this overall cannabis business model of having some place where people could go and consume. Am I right that it's not really moving forward with any great speed?
Yeah, at this point, I mean, the commission has had listening sessions this year in order to get feedback from current licensee holders or future hopefuls. But no, we are losing our footing in terms of being a leader as we think about nationally what the Massachusetts cannabis market looks like, because we're not moving as quickly as we can. I think many folks are well-intentioned. I think that there are a lot of obstacles in being able to progress things forward, and much of it comes back to folks being misinformed, right? There's concern that people are going to get so high that maybe they'll start stealing things. I've never met someone who got extremely high and then decided, I think I'm going to go steal something. If anything, I've seen them say, I wonder if there's snacks around, or I'd love to take a nap, right? So it's a lot of misinformation that's still being centered around these things that could progress us in a much more equitable model in terms of, I think of social consumption as a method to get folks to try different things that they traditionally wouldn't. And yet we're losing time, energy, and again, money by simply not making meaningful strides to getting this done. And much of the chaos that you outlined earlier in our conversation doesn't help us get there, because in my mind, that becomes the focus as opposed to what are we doing to support current and future license holders.
So a phrase that you used when Steve and I came to talk to you that confused me at first was the legacy market. And I love language, and once you explained it, I understood. So basically the legacy market is the phrase that's used to describe people who are still dealing cannabis illegally, I might add. And I do know plenty of people who don't go to dispensaries because they have a relationship with someone who's been selling them cannabis, sometimes for years.
Oh, most certainly.
And, you know, in their mind, they trust the person, they have a business and maybe even a friendship with the person, and they're not really interested in switching. One guy told me specifically it's also an issue of pricing, because you're bound by all the taxes and fees that you have to pay as a legal cannabis dispensary. They don't have to worry about that.
Correct. And they deliver for free sometimes. So.
And that's another aspect. So how strong is the legacy market still in Massachusetts, and is it a real business factor for people like you?
Oh, most certainly. When I think about our business model at Six Bricks, we're regularly looking at pricing to see if it can be comparable to what we know is happening in the legacy market. I mean, the reality is, as I mentioned, I went to a Springfield public high school. I knew the kids who were selling the dime bags, and I know many of them that still are. And that's a hard relationship to break up, right? When you think about 10 plus years of, I get to call this number, he's gonna show up, sometimes have multiple options for me, I'm gonna get to pick what I want. I can often see it, smell it, and then make a decision and then move on. I'm not paying taxes, I'm not having my ID checked twice, so on and so forth. So we do understand that. We try to ensure there's diversity of pricing, and I will say, as an independent retailer, that's one of the benefits in terms of customer shopping with us. The diversity of product, the diversity of pricing that we can offer. We'll have customers come in, they only have $10. I want to make sure they can walk out the door with something. And on the flip side, offering deli style, which is becoming more popular in the state, which essentially allows you to have cannabis in a jar, and folks are allowed to decide how many grams they want, but they can see the product before purchasing, because that's such an important part of why I think the legacy market continues to thrive. Think about our return policies here in the state of Massachusetts. It's very restrictive. And so if you buy an eighth and you get in your car, you pop the top and you decide, oh, I don't like the way those nugs look, try returning it. It is very difficult. The product's not defective, you've already opened it. It creates a less than ideal experience, to say the least. So yeah, the legacy market is still alive and well. They oftentimes can innovate a lot quicker than we can in the legal market as well. So yeah, it's constantly top of mind.
A final question here, because I've been watching the clock and I know you have things to do and places to go. And we talked a little bit about this off air, and that was about how Cheech and Chong now have 3 dispensaries in Western Massachusetts. And these weren't dispensaries that they started, but these were operations that they bought, pre-existing operations. Again, in our conversation, you said that there is a trend of these multi-state operators coming into an area, looking at the dispensaries, making some offers.
Most certainly.
And I think it probably surprised a lot of people that folks as famous and well known as Cheech and Chong would come to Western Massachusetts and own, you know, and purchase a dispensary in South Deerfield near Whately, of all places. But they're here. And in fact, according to their website, they have dispensaries in 9 states now. So they are a major player. Do you anticipate this is going to happen more in terms of these larger companies coming in and saying, well, you know, how are you doing? If you're not doing as well, here's a pile of money, let us buy your license?
Oh, most certainly. I mean, I think that within 2024, not to say I have a crystal ball, but we're going to see a lot more acquisitions. Just understanding you have a lot of distressed assets. I mean, it is tough to be a retailer in this environment. You need a run rate of about $4 million to be viable and pay your taxes. And remember, if you're not paying your taxes on time, it can impact your licensure because you need a certificate of good standing in order to get renewed. And so you're going to have folks that are going to have to make tough decisions. And I would say customers have the power to help small mom and pop shops stay in business by shopping with them and understanding the purchase power they have. But more celebrity brands are going to come to market. More multi-state operators will continue to figure out what are more viable markets for them. And it'll get tougher for folks like myself to exist in the space. I mean, there's just so many things working against us.
Well, Payton, I think you're doing a great job at Six Bricks.
Thank you.
And for any of us here in Springfield who want to support definitely a Springfield-based business, this is one to consider supporting. It really is.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And we want to have you come back. 420 was mentioned. So
yeah, the high holiday.
Okay.
I'll be back.
All right. Folks, you've been watching Government Matters here on Focus Springfield. Thanks very much for viewing.